guys, and welcome back to our third Scramble Sunday. This week we're going to be talking about poetry. This is kind of a scary, big-hitting standard that we have to tackle in English. So let's go ahead and jump on in and look at these differences amongst the grade levels so that you can go in confident tomorrow morning on Monday, knowing what you need to focus on to get some poetry in front of your students. The 7th grade level. Our 7th grade TEK says to analyze the effect of rhyme scheme, meter, and graphical elements such as punctuation and capitalization in poems across a variety of poetic forms. Guys, this is why teachers cannot figure out what they need to focus on in their classrooms for that grade level. That's way too much to do for like a 1 or 2 week poetry unit, right? So let's break it down and focus on some big chunks here. We're going to be looking at graphical elements, primarily punctuation and capitalization. And then we need to get a variety of poems in front of them so that they can see how these poets use capitalization and punctuation and other graphical elements. You just want to put stuff in front of them so they can see not all poems are the same. They're all different, but they do use all of these same techniques. They just kind of have freedom where they use it. 8th grade. 8th grade says, analyze the effect of graphical elements such as punctuation and line length in poems across a variety of poetic forms such as epic, lyric, and humorous poetry. Again, this is why we can't get anything done, guys. And we're going to focus on line length. So you're going to have the students specifically go into these poems and look at how authors have some lines long, some short. Maybe one has just one word. Put in front of them epics, okay? So the Odyssey, of course, is great for this one. Lyrics, so have them look up some music lyrics and look at it in that way. And then humorous poetry, okay? So we can play some with irony and showing them how poems aren't always sad, mad, or love, right? They can also be funny, and that's a whole new world for them to look at that way. So that's your 8th grade. Moving on to 9th grade. 9th grade high school says, analyze the structure, prosody, and graphic elements such as line length and word position in poems across a variety of poetic forms. Again, super long, but we are going to focus in and say, okay, what is different from 8th grade so I can add to their poetic knowledge at this point. Focus on structure. We brought in line length, but now we want to look at all of it. Maybe we're looking at punctuation and capitalization and the rhyme scheme and the meter. We're putting it all together to see how these poets structure their overall poem. Prosody, I mean, how do you want to say that one? I don't know. Shakespeare said words however he wanted to, so I'm going to as well. So make sure to include that for them as word position. So you're going to have to hit some on diction here. What is word choice? Why do poets use specific words rather than other? But more importantly, where do they position the words in this poem? Okay, if it is a powerful word, is it on a line on its own? So they're starting to feel the flow and change of these emotions in it based on where the poet decides to put the word. Moving on to 10th grade. 10th grade says, analyze the effects of metrics, rhyme schemes, types of rhymes such as end, internal, slant, and I, and other conventions in poems across a variety of poetic forms. Be looking at the metrics of these poems as well as the types of rhyme and give some kind of lesson front-loading all of these different types of rhyme conventions that poets can use in their poetry. Moving on to 11th grade. Analyze relationships among characteristics of poetry, including stanzas, line breaks, speaker, and sound devices in poems across a variety of poets. Look at these relationships among the characteristics of poetry, okay? So you have to be comparing poetry. Stanzas, okay? How many stanzas and what kind of impact does that have on the poem? If it's just one or if they have 7 of them. Line breaks, so where the author chooses to break those lines, right? We covered that up here in 8th grade, so you might have to do a refresh. Speaker and sound devices. This blew my mind that the word speaker was not brought up until 11th grade. So the speaker of your poem is not always the poet. The speaker of the poem is that voice you hear. So you're trying to get this point across in 11th grade by having them look at the sound devices that are used in it. Who are we hearing? The line breaks, okay? What is this voice that we're hearing in our head, and what is the purpose of it? 12th grade, you guys get all the fun, right? Analyze the effects of sound, form, figurative language, graphics, and dramatic structure in poetry across literary time periods and cultures. For once on a standard, 12th grade does have to introduce new information. We're going to look at the effects of sound, right, from the previous year. This time we're going to add on form specifically. It kind of goes into structure, a little bit different. You can dig into some of the heavy hitter stuff figurative language wise once you get to 12th grade. Dramatic structure. Okay, so what was the purpose in them structuring the poem this way for dramatic purposes so that you read it with that intention, right? This is more of that performance poetry to make sure that when you read it or you hear it, it has that feeling. You understand the intention behind that structure. You should specifically pay attention to literary time periods and cultures. So you should be putting poems in front of them from current day and from back in the 1600s, okay? From cultures in America, maybe on the other side of the world. I would really focus in some on language and diction from different cultures and how that word choice impacts it, as well as making sure that you include different time period pieces in there. Vertical alignment, 7th through 12th grade when it comes to poetry. Let's move on and see how we can apply that in the classroom. All right, guys, so how are we going to bring up poetry in the classroom in grades 7 through 12 to ensure what we're doing are hitting these state standard TEKS and they're vertically aligned to the other grades? Well, I think a great warm-up, regardless of grade level, would be to have them pick their favorite song. Now, of course, you have to be careful with this. Make sure it's school appropriate. They've got to know at least one. And have them pull up those lyrics. They need to copy those down on their warm-up sheet, and then they need to tell you the meaning of them. Now, of course, depending on grade level, you can add a little bit extra. So in this one, they need to look at rhyme scheme, in 7th grade. In 8th grade, they should look at the length of the lines, right? That's why you want to have them pull up the lyrics so they can see what that musician, okay, how they intended it to be read when it's on paper, because it's a little different than how it sounds. And figure out what that meaning is, right? And pay attention to that and do a quick write on it. That way they have a personal connection. They like this song. They see that that song is poetry and they start to pay attention to the purpose and intention behind how it's structured. Defining the word, okay? We can't expect them to learn poetry if they don't know what that is defined as. So we define poetry as a literary work in which special intensity is given to the expression of feelings and ideas by the use of distinctive style and rhythm. I think this one hits it on the head. It has every level in there, okay? And you can focus on your part and say, look, you're gonna focus later on the special intensity. Right now, we're gonna focus on these feelings and ideas in this grade level, okay? But this one covers all of it, and they know what they're working with and looking at. So let's move on to some fun activities in the classroom. In 7th and 8th grade, you teachers should be focusing on the elements of poetry, poetic forms, and then punctuation and capitalization, okay? We don't want to throw them into the deep end and hit them with everything. And I think that's where we struggle as teachers most, especially me, because I want to give them everything on a poem, right? But we cannot overwhelm them up front. It's too much to process in just 2 years. So we'll focus on these 3 things. Some activity ideas to do that. First, do the purpose of punctuation and capitalization. Give them a lesson in that. Give them a lot of different poems, right? Here, these variety of poetic forms, and let them see how punctuation and capitalization are used. You can pull current day text, you can pull lyrics, you can pull classic poems that we're all familiar with. It's important that they see it amongst many poems so they can start making that connection on what the purpose is. Do a form hunt, a gallery walk, okay? Hang up a lot of different poems and have the students go on a hunt for specific forms based on a lesson that you front loaded with them. Finally, you can do a March Madness bracket. I do it in March because that's a basketball thing, but I like to introduce poetry in February. So you could come up with some kind of fun, quirky name for whenever you do it. Set it up bracket style and introduce a new poem to them every day and have them pick this poem or this poem. And whichever poem they like the most, you tally up the votes by the class or by all your class periods. I've done that before to kind of create this battle amongst the classes. And then you pick the winner and they move on. And then you read that winner and a new one the next day. So they're getting that repetition with these poems. They're starting to identify why they like that poem. They're going to have to defend it as time moves on and have them focus on the elements, forms, punctuation, and capitalization at that age. On to 9th and 10th grade. Blue words first. You guys are primarily focusing on poetic structure, the words, and rhyme scheme. That's a lot to unload in just 2 years. Some activity examples. You can have them build a poem copying a structure. This is such a good, low-risk way to introduce poetry to them. I'm currently doing it with my students. We break down and analyze a poem, and then we mimic it, okay? And have that same purpose or meaning or structure or words or rhyme scheme, whichever one you want to focus on, and have them create it. They're not afraid because they know how they're filling it in, but they still have to come up with an idea, with a concept, and then mimic that form. Diction lesson. Have them go on a word hunt to find powerful words in poems. So you can just put poems everywhere or put out a book. I have lots of poetry books and have them go through and identify these powerful words. If they can start picking them out, then they can start understanding the purpose of the poets using them. Have them compare songs to poem. Okay, songs typically rhyme, especially the chorus, which ties in to that beautiful warm-up we have, and have them compare the two. There's Tupac is great for this. Kanye West has a lot of good lyrics that are poetic. Taylor Swift. Okay, so depending on the population in your classroom, you can pick a popular artist that's school appropriate and have them compare it to a poem that maybe has the same thematic message. It's engaging because they like to see that they're listening to it, that poetry is a part of their everyday life, see the musician's intention. It's just a little less scary than putting old dead poets in front of them. Moving on to 11th and 12th grade, you guys get that icing on the cake, right? They're no longer scared of poetry, so we can get a little scarier with the words we put in front of them. Blue words, you're gonna have them focus on relationships, figurative language, and time periods, okay? We're diving in deep here. The poetry slam contest. Now, if your students are at the point where they can write their own poems using these things, identifying relationships, having figurative language, being aware of their time period, maybe give them a time period that they can write to, then do it. But if they're not there yet, just have them do a poetry slam contest, reading aloud already written poems. They still have to look at that poem and figure out how it's supposed to be read. They're gonna have to pay attention to the relationships. They have to pay attention to the figurative language. They're gonna have to be aware of the time periods and how they perform and read this poem to their class. And the beautiful thing is all of your class gets to hear numerous poems. I love this activity. I don't think it works well in these other grades because they need all of this and they need the confidence in who they are as a person to be able to stand up and read poetry out loud. It's just a little scary. Is using the poem Speech to the Young. It is full of figurative language, and I'm not talking just alliteration and metaphor. It's got high level stuff in it. Actually, I had it pulled up in here. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. Oh yeah, here we go. Alliteration, consonants, theme, okay, symbolism. These are all kind of heavy hitters that they should be a little familiar with from other lessons throughout the years, and now they can find it in poetry, and then maybe go have them mimic that and write their own. I love Dylan Thomas versus Tupac. I actually have a book that I'm going to show you guys. It's this hip hop poetry and the classics for the classrooms. I had a teacher a long time ago refer me to this, and it is beautiful, beautiful. You have so many people that you can compare in here. Rudyard Kipling, Edgar Allan Poe. And then on the other side, you've got Run DMC, Eminem, Notorious B.I.G., Ice Cube. Maybe it's just that I'm, a 90s baby and love that kind of hip hop music, but it's super engaging, and they can see that these lyricists and these poets all go at it from this feeling perspective, right? And really that's what it comes down to, is this expression of feelings and ideas using this rhythm and meter and these other beautiful forms and ideas. So you can have them compare those and focus in on these relationships, time periods. That hits that massively. I hope you guys feel confident going into your Monday morning tomorrow. It's a super special Scramble Sunday. How about that for some alliteration? Because it is Super Bowl Sunday. We've got the Kansas City Chiefs going against the Eagles, and you have Valentine's Day coming up in just a couple days. This is a great time to dive into poetry with your students. Don't let it scare you just because it has so much to it. Focus on your grade level and pick activities that are going to truly support that state standard. I hope you guys have a great rest of the weekend. Go Chiefs, because I can't root for the Eagles, and I'll see you guys next Sunday. Bye.